aquariums, fish, water in the box. What am I talking about? Why am I here? This one. Today we're gonna talk about freshwater aquariums, why start one, how to start one, and what knowledge can we use from our marine biology class can we demonstrate and use in this hobby. Let's get right to it. Alright, first of all, I'm not a professional YouTuber or videographer to that matter, so any quality loss will be... I'm sorry about that. Anyway, first of all, why do we start an aquarium? One, it's relaxing. So watching fish is very therapeutic. So is, hearing the sounds of running water, it's therapeutic for some people. I typically like to study my notes while I'm with my fish and look at them right now. If you can see them, they're gradually just moving towards me because they know me and they kind of want food, even though I fed them like 20 minutes ago. Next is, it's also kind of relaxing and therapeutic to work in the tank, to be elbows deep in water, cleaning it, trimming your plants, even though I haven't trimmed my plants in a while. As you can see, this big bush of water wisteria just floating around. It's not typically like that, but I've neglected it since January. So it's also relaxing being elbows deep in water, just trying to finagle things around and aquascaping and stuff like that. It's also an expression of yourself, how you arrange your decoration, how you arrange your plants and your gravel and your soil and your lighting and stuff like that. Finally, it can be a good educational tool because it's a isolated ecosystem that you can use to emulate a body of water like a river, a pond, a lake, or even marine habitats like the sea. Or there's even like squid aquariums, or not squid aquariums, shrimp aquariums out there that grow shrimp. So it can teach you like quite a bit about the water parameters and how these different types of living organisms interact with one another in an isolated environment that you can control. You can change the water parameters, you can change the water chemistry and stuff like that. So it's really in your hands. And finally, it's a good challenge, especially if you're a beginner. There's going to be a lot of information to kind of like know and learn when you're starting out. So if you like a challenge, this is the hobby for you, maybe. Okay, so first of all, a little bit of show and tell about my tank. This is a 20-gallon glass tank, freshwater aquarium. Okay, freshwater is a little bit easier than marine aquarium. I'll get more into that later, in my opinion at least. So anyway, these are my fishies. These are my platies. As you can see, they're kind of rotund, kind of thick right now because they just ate. And this guy's on the verge of pooping. They're mixed between 4 females and 2 males currently. Those tiny things are the babies that they kind of just pooped out or gave birth to in January. So they're still kind of small. They're still kind of there. They actually gave birth like a week ago to that one tiny one right there, that little spotted cutie right there. Let's see, what else? Some dragonstone or Cereus stone, as you can say, that's for my hardscape. We got a big growth of water wisteria over here. We got an Amazon sword at the back right there, and behind the water wisteria is probably dying. Maybe not, actually still good. I can see one of these leaves, still pretty good. We have 2 pieces of Java fern on behind these 2 rocks. This is a crypt Wendy up here in the front, and also over here, maybe, I don't think you can see it. Moss ball, just a big hunking ball of moss that rolls around right here. That's basically the interesting stuff. A bit of equipment at the back. You can see my big canister filter at the back right there. You can see my heater right there. Right now it's kind of warming up, so it's not turning on that much. This big blue thing, it's a power head. It means it circulates water for 15 minutes every 3 hours, I think I said. So this is just to circulate the nutrients back to the intake of the filter at the very back over here. So there won't be any dead spots in terms of like the nutrients in the water and stuff like that. So like if fish poops go here, they can still go back there because the power head will push them. What else do I have? Oh, there's also a tiny tuft of Anubias nana over here in this rock. You can't probably see it because it's covered up by this big honking mass of water wisteria over here, but there's one right there. Anyway, yeah, that is my tiny tank. It's been very beginner friendly and stuff like that. So you can emulate it if you want. Okay, so my notes are down here, by the way. If you see me glancing down here, that's my notes, so I don't forget what I'm saying. Anyway, now, how to start an aquarium. I'll be talking mostly about the freshwater aquarium because that's what I've been doing for the past 5, 6-ish years now. Yeah, and I think it's kind of much simpler to do a freshwater aquarium for a beginner compared to a marine aquarium. More on that later. Anyway, so tip number 1, do your research and have patience, okay? So doing your research counts for what fish you want to put in, what type of plants you want to put in, what are your parameters in your water, how to do this, how to do that. I'll try my my voice cracked. Oh my gosh. Anyway, I'll try my best to kind of cut down on the research part a little bit by giving you pointers or what I've learned during this, but not everyone's situation is the same. So what might work for me might not work for you. And that's actually one of the tenets of fish keeping. What somebody in the internet says that works for them might not work for you necessarily. So it's kind of that learning curve that you have to find the balance of what works and what doesn't. Anyway, so yeah, do your research on the internet. There's a lot of YouTube videos and channels and forum posts out there. And also don't be shy to ask your local fish keeping store, or LFS as we like to call it. So the workers there have excellent knowledge on how to start a tank, what's going in your tank. If you have a problem, go to them. Maybe they can help you. Anyway, have patience. This is an ecosystem. It has a bunch of living things in it, and sometimes when you do something, when you change something, it won't necessarily be that apparent in the beginning. So it might take a little bit of time in order for it to be established, or for example, if you're waiting for plants to grow, it won't grow in a week. Okay, you might see some tiny spouts of it here and there, but typically you're gonna see a couple of weeks, 2 months to see any changes in your tank. Like for the fish, for example, they started out as tiny, like half an inch creatures, and now they're about 2 inches in a couple of months. So have patience, let your tank do what tank do, and you'll be fine. Oh, look at these tiny fishes. They're kind of interested in the moss ball right there. They see something floating down. They're trying to eat it. Anyway, so let's say you want to start a freshwater aquarium. Vince, what do you want? What do you need? What do I buy in the fish store? First, you'll need a tank. You'll need some lights. You need a filter. You need a bubbler, that bubble thing that goes up that you can see in films, movies, and your pet stores. You'll need decoration. You'll need fish. You'll need fish food. Let's see. Plants, maybe? Plants are optional. I highly recommend having plants even though you're a beginner. Plants are really helpful. I love plants. They're green. They're lovely. Let's see. You need a heater for your water. If you have tropical fish, they kind of need warmer water than, let's say, a goldfish. If you have cold water fishes, like cold water, and you live in a quite hot and humid climate, you need a fish cooler. You need a thermometer to measure that fish temperature. You need a water test kit to test your water parameters. You need a water conditioner to condition your water, not your hair. You need aquarium salt. Yes, this is a freshwater aquarium, but I still use aquarium salt. Why? Because it helps the fish produce their slime coat that protects them, it keeps them a little bit happy. A little bit of salinity keeps them happy in the long way. Anyway, more on that later. I'm blabbering right now. That's basically it for now. There's a lot of products. There's a lot of equipment that you might need. Some of them you might not need. As I said, it depends on what you're looking for in this hobby and what your requirements are for your current situation. Okay, so now to actual instructional things about your aquarium, stuff that you really need to know and have it down, we're gonna talk about the nitrogen cycle. If you go to your local aquarium or any internet forums or YouTube videos, we're gonna talk about cycling your aquarium. Cycle your aquarium. What does it mean? How do you cycle your aquarium? Is it a bicycle? Who knows? Anyway, so this is the simplest way to break it down. Okay, well, not really simplest, but this is how I like to break it down. So fish, they eat stuff, they poop, like any living organism. They poop, and sometimes they don't eat the food that you put in there. So fish, food, and poop, step one. And when that decays, it produces ammonia and carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide and ammonia, those are two waste products that comes from the composition of organic matter, can be helped. So carbon dioxide, the tank gets rid of it by gas exchange. It exchanges with the surface air right here, yada yada, and that's basically it. But what happens to ammonia? Ammonia stays in the water. So ammonia is incredibly caustic, incredibly toxic. It can cause burns on the gills, on the fins. It can cause fin rot, really bad stuff. How do you get rid of ammonia? There's this thing called the nitrogen cycle to get rid of it, and here's how it goes. So fish, poop, and food decomposes into ammonia, and we have the nitrosomonas bacteria that processes it and breaks it down to nitrite. And nitrite is a little bit less toxic than ammonia, but it's still pretty toxic, still pretty harmful. So another bunch of bacteria called the Nitrobacter family of bacteria breaks it down to nitrate, which is the least toxic of the three. So ammonia, bacteria, nitrite, another brand of bacteria, to nitrate. Nitrate is not 100% safe either. Yes, it can be less toxic than ammonia and nitrite. See the difference? Nitrite with an I, nitrate with an A. It can be less toxic, but it's not all inherently that good either. Very high buildup of nitrate can be bad to your fish and your water chemistry. So how do we get rid of that? Well, the plants use nitrate as a fertilizer, so that's why it's good to have a bunch of plants. Well, maybe not this much bunch of plants. This is overgrown and a problem. I know I should address it later, as you can see at the end of the video. Also, water changes. If you don't have that much plants, or if your plants are still establishing, you can change your water. So, how much water should you change? It depends. It depends on how old your tank is and how cycled it is. If you're beginning, I would say about 35-ish, 40% of water changes per week. And once your tank is established, you can do about 25% every 2 weeks. How do you know if your tank is established? Well, simple. You use a master test kit. Something like, if I can find it, something like this. So it's a bunch of test tubes, vials, and reagents that you add and drop, and you see color changes using a card. If I can find the card here. So it's basically a litmus test for your water. So you fill up a test tube, a glass test tube, with your aquarium water, and you put some dropper drops on it, and you compare it to here. So mostly in the fish keeping business, we measure stuff in ppm, or parts per million, to determine if your tank is properly cycled or not. You want an ammonia level to be in the 0 ppm, nitrates to 0 ppm. I mean nitrites, because that's the second step. Second step. Nitrites at 0 ppm, and nitrates can be a little bit, you can have a little bit of nitrates because that's the final step anyway, and it's gonna build up inevitably unless you have very much overgrown plants like here that can eat it up, gobble it up. But yeah, so 0 ammonia, 0 nitrites, a little bit of nitrates. Okay, I talked about changing your water. How do you change your water? You scoop it out, typically with a gravel vacuum, so you can take out leftover food and stuff, detritus in the gravel. So you just suck it up into a bucket or directly to your sink if you're fancy like that, and put in water. Well, not really. Well, first you have to condition your water. So you have a water conditioner. water conditioner. So you add this to your water before you put it into your tank, because the water, that our tap water, has chlorines, chloramines, and heavy metals that you want to get rid of. Chlorines, chloramines, and heavy metals are bad for your fish. That's why we get rid of them. Naturally, in the rivers, if it's a good, healthy, environmentally friendly, I guess, maybe not, river, there's big flow of water, so everything is diluted. Dilution is the solution, as people would say. But in our tap water, or in our aquarium water, the water stays here. Yes, we have a filter to filter out most of the impurities and the poop and, oh my god, are they fighting? No, they're not, they're fine. Anyway, so we have a filter to keep our bacteria and the detritus and organic matter circulating and our nutrients circulating, but you can't really filter out the chlorines, chloramines, and heavy metals. That's why we use the water conditioner to get rid of them. Let's see. How do you cycle your tank? Couple of methods. First, patience. You set up your tank, put in your plants, put in your rocks, but do not put in your fish. Don't put in your fish right away, okay? Even though you have a water conditioner, don't put in your fish right away. Very important. You want to keep it cycled. So you just put everything in except the fish. Of course, put water. Except the fish, leave it there for about a month and a half, and keep checking your water once every 2-3 days. Naturally, that bacteria, that the good bacteria, Nitrosomonas and Nitrobacter, will build up in your plants. It's gonna build up in your soil, it's gonna build up on your glass, and of course your filter media in your filter. What if you don't have a month and a half to wait? What if you just wanna do stuff right away? Well, you can kind of accelerate that. One, by putting a little bit. Oh, splashy. I just cleaned my tank, so there's water everywhere. Anyway, you can put a little bit of fish food in the water. Yes, without fishes. So that's gonna kind of spike the ammonia in the water a little bit, and to help the bacteria to get started breaking it down and processing it. Next, you can. I haven't really done this myself, but some people use pure ammonia. They dose their water with pure ammonia and stuff like that. I don't recommend it for a beginner because I haven't done it myself, and when I was beginning. So the fish food method is one of the good ones. Next, you can use the store-bought things. I'll be right back real quick. Whoa. Okay, you can use something like this bacteria in a bottle that they sell in fish stores. They advertise it as you can put fish right away after you put this. So this is basically denitrifying bacteria in a bottle. But for me, if I would use this, I would still wait a couple of weeks. Okay, so there you go. Main takeaways: nitrogen cycle, very important. Ammonia, nitrate, very important. Don't put fish right away. Build up your nitrogen. Build up your denitrifying bacteria. Use fish food or use bacteria in a bottle. Oh, one more method. If you have a friend or a local fish store, you can ask them if they have any filter media. The scummier and gunkier it is, the better. So you can just take that scummy, gunky, like this actually, scummy, gunky filter media, and you just squeeze it in your filter, squeeze it in your water, and wait. Of course, you'll keep testing your water every now and then, and you should be fine in a couple weeks. Now that you understand the nitrogen cycle, let's keep talking about water chemistry. I'm not going to show my face because I just got out of a shift at work and I kind of look gross right now. Anyway, for freshwater tanks, measuring your pH, ammonia, nitrates, and nitrites, and maybe water hardness is the essentials. But for saltwater tanks, you should also measure salinity. You can measure salinity using a spectrometer or hydrometers. There's also electric gadgets out there that you can just submerge and it's going to tell you water reading. Water over time, of course, evaporates, but salt stays in your aquarium. This means that after a period of time, the water salinity will be too high and your fish and corals, if you have any, won't like that. Thus, fresh water should be added. There's automatic water addition contraptions out there, so you won't have to keep an eye on your tanks 24/7, which is nice. Next is pH. Creatures that live in the water require a certain amount of pH that varies from species to species, depending on where they came from and what their needs are. For my platies here, they like somewhere around 6.7 to 8 pH, I believe. And I think last time I measured mine, mine was about at 6.9. pH changes with what decorations you put there and where your water is sourced from. For example, um, adding driftwood can lower down your pH because of the composition of the things in the driftwood, while adding rock like mine can raise my pH a little bit. If you don't like your pH, you can also buy some chemicals and additives at the pet store that can drop or raise your pH accordingly. But before you do that, make sure to add those additives very gradually because your fish need time to acclimate. Your fish and your plants need time to acclimate to the changes in the pH. And if you add or drop pH drastically, and very fast, it's gonna lead to bad things such as fish dying, or it's gonna stress them out that they're gonna lower their immune system. I actually have some snails in there, some narrowed snails, so too acidic of pH can lead them to not developing their shells adequately. It's gonna diminish their ability to create their shells. Temperature. My buddies right here are tropical fishes, so they like warmer or warmish water, about 72 to 76 Fahrenheit. I keep it stable with a automatic thermometer at the back. I don't know if you can see it. It's right behind those plants on the right side. And there's a floating thermometer around there somewhere in the forest of green. I believe it's still there somewhere. Some fishes like colder water, so you can purchase a chiller unit instead of a heater. The chiller unit basically just takes water out from your aquarium, cools it down a little bit to your desired temperature, then pumps it back into your aquarium. Wrong water temperature diminishes their ability to grow and affects their activity or their oxygen delivery. Also, it stresses them out, which we know, which what I said earlier, reduces their immune system and makes them much more susceptible to diseases. Okay, so from now on, I'm gonna talk to the bottom up, or start from the bottom up of what's going on in the tank now that we talked about water. So I'm gonna talk about substrate now. Substrate is the thing that you put underneath. It can be gravel, it can be soil, it can be sand. For me, I have a planted tank, so I use organic potting soil that I sifted to make sure there's no rocks or there's no twigs in there. The logic behind the potting soil is it's good for growing plants in dry conditions, so therefore it must be good at growing plants in wet conditions. It has nutrients required for plant growth and automatically fertilizes them to some degree. Thus, I use it for my planted tank. You can use gravel or sand for planted tanks also. You would just need to fertilize your plants more by adding some root tablets or dosing your water column, depending on what plants you keep. More on that later. You should also aim for substrate that mimics your fish's natural habitat. My platy's natural habitat are the rivers of Central America, so I use rocks and plants and try to emulate that. Some species, like cory catfishes, like sifting through the substrate, so I wouldn't use anything that may harm their mouths while they're sifting through the substrate, so I use something like aquarium sand or pool filter sand. Next is decoration. What can you put in your tank? Well, what do you want to put in your tank? It's a blank canvas. You can put whatever you want in it as long as it's aquarium safe, of course. How to determine if stuff is aquarium safe? Well, most of the decorations in pet stores are aquarium safe, meaning their paint is non-toxic and the sorts. If you're not sure, leave your decoration submerged in clean tap water for some time, say like 2 days to a week, to see if there's any chipping or degradation of material. This is You can use this method for driftwood also, as you need to have the wood waterlogged to prevent it from floating in your aquarium. I also kind of use this for my rocks to make sure there's no harmful minerals that kind of seep out of it before I put it into my aquarium. How you arrange your decorations is up to you. You can look up award-winning aquarists like Takashi Amano or Paul Boutin, I think I'm saying that correctly, to try and emulate what their design philosophy is and develop your own style. At the beginning, I was kind of going for an Amano style aquarium, but it didn't really work out because my plants just got way too big and I need a bigger tank, I think. But anyway, that's okay. That's fine. I would probably go to a bigger tank in the future anyway. Next, we're gonna talk about filtration and the other equipment we need. Filtration, there's a bunch of different filters out there, majority of which are canister filters, like the one I have. There's sponge filters, hang-on-back filters, and undergravel filters, each spanning different price points and sizes per tank. For a beginner, I recommend a hang-on back filter. Common brands that you might see out there are Aquarium, Marineland, and Fluval. Those are the 3 brands I've used over the past 6 years, and they're very good, and they're not that expensive, to be honest. Filter media, or the stuff that you can put in filter for your biological beneficial bacteria to grow and to filter out the mechanical stuff like rocks, poop, or floating plant debris. It can come in different materials also. It can be just simple filter floss, or it can be ceramic or plastic balls to basically multiply the surface area that your bacteria grows on. As I said earlier, the filter essentially runs your aquarium water through a series of materials in order to take care of detritus and ammonia, and also to circulate your nutrients around. Okay, next I'm going to talk about the bubbler, which is the fancy thing that spouts up bubbles that you can see in your pet stores or in other stuff that you've seen aquarium. A bubbler is essentially an air pump hooked to a silicone tube with an air stone at the end. So the bubbles itself do not pump oxygen to your water column, but instead they serve to break the water's surface tension. It allows CO2 and oxygen to exchange between the water and the surface air. Fishes need oxygen, and if they're not getting enough, some fish will let you know by swimming near the surface, and because that's where the area of the tank where oxygen concentration is the most. As a side note, do not keep a goldfish in a bowl without a bubbler. They're going to be stressed out and they could have a shorter lifespan. Keep your fish happy and have it bubbly. I actually do not use an air stone and a bubbler in my case because if you can see, my filter output is enough to break the surface tension in the water, and that is enough for gas exchange to occur. Next, I'm going to talk about aquarium lighting. Aquarium lighting is important because it allows your fish to see, and it emulates the natural day-night cycle in nature. It also provides an energy source to the plants so that they can do photosynthesis. There's a number of types of lighting out there in the market, from fluorescent lamps to LED ones. If you're a beginner, you can get a combo bundle with a tank and a lamp at pet stores, which is perfectly fine. Just make sure not to run your lights at full capacity at 24 hours a day because your fish need to sleep and they need dark. Also, if you're gonna run your lights at full power, you're gonna run the risk of burning your plant leaves. Too much light can also cause algae blooms, which is bad. Currently, I have my lights set at about 70%, and I run it for about 8 hours a day. I run it at a time where I'm active during the day, so I can enjoy the company of my fish. Anyway, as a beginner, starting a planted tank can seem difficult and daunting. However, I think it's better to have live plants versus plastic ones. There's a number of reasons for that. One is they can act as another layer of filtration. Remember the nitrogen cycle? Yeah, so they also diffuse oxygen into the water column and consume carbon dioxide, helping your fish breathe easier. And they can also be pets in their own way, as you have to take care of them by feeding them or fertilizing and grooming them if they get too big. They're also beautiful as they sway around naturally with the water current. Remember those 2 aquarists that I talked about earlier, Takashi Yamano and Paul Boutin? They use plants in great effects in their tanks, often emulating nature by usage of carpeting plants or moss. They also use those plants as kind of a mini diorama, I guess, of what you can see in nature. Last is the plants provide natural cover for the fish. Sometimes fish like to hide, to rest and to feel safe, and having natural landscape would help them achieve that. There are hundreds of plants out there, some with more growth requirements compared to others, therefore they can be kind of finicky to grow. Beginner plants are usually the ones that can quite literally grow inside the toilet bowl if you want to, and that's foolproof for starting a tank. Examples of beginner plant species are water wisteria, like the ones that I have, the big mass right there on the left, Java fern, kind of a little bit to the back right, Java moss, Amazon sword, Anubias nana, cryptocorenes, and duckweed. You can also have Marimo moss balls. I don't know if you can see it, but it's that big honking ball of green at the lower right corner of the screen. You can also have, Marimo moss balls, jungle valves, and bacopas. It's important to note that some plants will experience wilting at the beginning stages, but that's just because they're trying to still acclimate to your water parameters. I promise they're gonna grow back, as for example, the cryptocorenes, which is in the front foreground, lower right of my aquarium, I trimmed the leaves off when I got them. And now, after 6 months, they're all coming back, bigger than ever. Some plants will be planted into the substrate, like the cryptocoreans and Anubias, or not Anubias, Hannah, or the water wisteria, and some just needs to float. Some of them are tubers, therefore they take their nutrients from the water column, not the soil. Therefore, you should tie them behind your plants. You can use string, you can use rubber bands, and they also sell some aquarium safe super glue to stick them to the back of your rocks, like what I did. This is where tip number 1 and 2, as I talked about earlier, come into play. Do your research and be patient. The last thing we're going to talk about, conceptually at least, is livestock. We're going to talk about selection of fish, what fish you want to use, what you want to take care of, and stuff like that. Again, tip number 1 and 2, do your research and be patient. I'm going to recommend a few beginner fish here in my video, but don't be afraid to branch out as your experience grows, or try to do more research of your own in what you want to take care of. It's important to make note of the, well, it's not really a rule, it's more of like a guideline, an inch of fish per gallon of water. So if you have 20 gallons of if your tank is 20 gallons and your fish has a maximum growth size of 1 inch, technically you can have 20 fishes in there. Like I said, it's a guideline, it's not really a rule. For me, for my 20-gallon tank, the platies can reach about 2 inches at fully grown, so I bought 6 of them. So technically 12 gallons should be enough for them. But I like them to have extra space so they can roam around and swim and stuff like that. That's why I only got 6. Okay, speaking of platies, that's the number 1 fish that I would recommend. They're a tropical fish species, therefore they require warmer waters, and they're from the rivers of Central America. They're live bearers, meaning that they give birth to live young, not eggs. They're omnivores, so they can eat both stuff from flakes to frozen worms. Although I feed them some steamed green peas without the shell, of course, now and again, for fiber, so they can help. It can help their digestive system. They're voracious eaters, and that's the part of the fun of the fish keeping. Watching your fish gobble up the food that you put in your tank, it's a wonderful sight to see. It's also one of the ways that you can interact with your pet. Platies are good in groups. Usually I would keep them in groups with more females than male, because males like to harass females for some of that Discovery Channel action, if you know what I mean. Next is the humble goldfish. Goldfish are cold water fishes, meaning they don't necessarily require a heater, although I recommend getting one, especially if you live in a cold area. And goldfishes eat everything. Like platies, they're omnivores and they eat a lot. It's best to keep about 1 or 2 of them in a 20-gallon tank, as they can be pretty sizable as they grow and mature, and they can live for a very long time, upwards of 15 years. They also poop a lot, so prepare to have a lot of gravel vacuuming when you're doing your daily, or not daily, weekly maintenance. Okay, next is the betta fish. The betta fish, those are the tiny colorful fishes with nice flowy fins that you can see in a cup in your pet store. Betta fishes are very territorial, so it's best to kind of keep them alone, as they would bully and try to fight other fishes. But you can keep some tank mates with them, just make sure they're like shrimp or snails, because they really won't do anything with shrimp or snails. Betta fishes are carnivorous mostly, so they kind of feed on bloodworms, mosquitoes, tiny insects and stuff like that. And also you can have your general all-purpose betta pellets. One cool thing that you can do with bettas is you can stick a piece of food onto your finger, dangle it on top of the aquarium, not too far from the water surface though, and they're gonna try to jump up and catch the food. And you can feel their tiny teeth on your fingertip. It's very amusing. Next is the tetras. Well, most commonly the neon tetra, as that's the one that you can easily find in any pet store. Tetras are schooling fishes, so I recommend getting at least 6 of them in the start. At least 6 of them, depending on your tank size. Tetras are very tiny, so seeing a school of them wander around the tank in groups is very relaxing to see. Due to their size and coloration, they're quite popular to use in artsy aquariums, in aquascaping aquariums, like the Takashi Amano ones. Their size and their color give you a semblance of space. It makes it seem like that your aquarium is much more bigger than it is because your fish is tiny. As for diet requirements, tetras, excuse me, are a tropical fish who are omnivores, so this kind of similar to platy in a sense. The last fish I'm going to talk about is the zebra daniel. Zebra daniels are very active fish that swim energetically in the top 1/3 of your water column, which is your tank. They playfully chase around each other around in the tank, and they're very fast for a small fish. They thrive in numbers also, so like I said, get a few of them at the start. Don't leave them alone because they're gonna be stressed out. Like platies and tetras, you can feed them tropical fish flakes and bloodworms and peas. Zebra daniels can be a bit nippy though, like nippy. So avoid putting them in with fish with long, big, flowy fins like goldfish, especially not with beta. Okay, so now we know some core concepts, and now we have sort of like a shopping list of what we need to start. How do we actually start? It would be easier if I had the tank to set up to demonstrate on how to actually start a tank and how to put in the stuff, but I'm just gonna do this like a start time section. For tank size, I recommend about 10 to 30 gallons at the start. The bigger the tank, the more forgivable it is. The more forgivable it is for a beginner to nail the water chemistry, as the large number of water acts as a buffer when you make changes. Bigger tanks also mean more real estate for your fish to swim around and a bigger canvas if you like to decorate an aquascape. Next, after you acquire your tank, you would first want to fill it up with water. Don't put any decorations, don't put soil, don't put plants, don't put gravel, don't put fish, especially not fish. Just fill it up with water. This is to check for leaks. If there are leaks, please contact the person or the place that you purchased your tank from. So, what if there's no leaks? Let's move on to the next step. The next step would be choosing a spot where you want to put your tank. Ideally, you would want a spot where there's no direct sunlight, as the sunlight would have algae grow like crazy and very fast and very hard to get rid of. But put them in a place where you would not neglect them. So put them somewhere noticeable. Okay, because if you don't see your aquarium on a regular basis, you would tend to neglect it and forget about how to maintain it. Also, probably forget to feed your fish, which is very bad. After you choose a spot, after you put your aquarium there, first put your substrate in. Substrate of your choice, like I said earlier, you can have soil, you can have gravel, you can have sand, and you can even have a bare bottom tank if that's your jam, which means there's no substrate really, it's just glass at the bottom. And I recommend dampening up your substrate a little bit with a little bit of water. This is not because there's some special tricks to it, but for me, I find it easier to move around rocks and decorations and stuff like that into substrate that's fairly damp. If you have plants, now is the time to put your plants where they belong. Either jam them into the soil or just hook them up to your decoration. Next, place your decorations where you want them to be. Of course, they have to be prepared, as I mentioned earlier. Driftwood has to be waterlogged, or they have to be clean and stuff like that. If you don't have time to let your decorations sit underwater for a number of days, you can always just give it the old scrub-a-dub-dub with clean water and a clean toothbrush under running cold water, and just hope for the best. This is just to make sure there's no dust from them, because if you buy your decoration from a pet store and they're on the shelf, they're most likely have dust. So you put your substrate, you put your plants, you put your hardscape or your decoration in. What's next? Well, you fill it up with water. Fill it up until about 85 to 90% of the way at the top. So you put your water in, you put your plants in, substrate is there. Next, you add your water conditioner. Sometimes in the bottle, I don't mean sometimes, but all the time. In the instruction manual of your water conditioner, it tells you how much you should put according to your tank size. So follow that, give it a little swish around with your arm, and leave it there. Do not add fish on day one, despite what people say. Let your tank cycle for a month and a half at least. Check your water parameters using a water test kit every now and again. I recommend every 2 to 3 days, just to make sure your denitrifying bacteria is growing. If it's not reaching there in a good amount of time, you can add some fish food to help kickstart the process, or you can add more of your live bacteria. So let's say you cycled your tank for a month and a half now, and all your water parameters look good. Now you can add your fish. So you go to your pet store, you get, let's say, about 6 platies, 4 female, 2 male. You go home, what do? Do not add your fish directly out of the bag into your aquarium, okay? Number of reasons. One, you don't want the aquarium water from the pet store mixing with your water. Sometimes aquarium water have some icky beaky, like, they're just gross stuff, like maybe diseases from dead fish and some other tanks, because aquarium water from the pet store all share one water source. Also, sometimes it has some parasites in there that you don't want in your tank. So what you should do actually is float your bag. When you buy fish, it's gonna come in a plastic bag. So just leave it floating to the water for about 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, take about 15% of the fish in the bag water, dump it out, and put about the same amount of your aquarium water into the bag. Rinse and repeat for about 3 times. And after exchanging water exchange, your fish should have been acclimated quite nicely. So go ahead and release them into your tank. Give them a couple of hours to a few days to try and acclimate themselves to the new environment. You can always just add a little bit of food here and there, just to like kind of like entice them a little bit, to say like, hey, you're a friend and you're here to feed them and they shouldn't be alarmed. And yeah, that's basically it. You have fish in your water box and they should be swimming happily. If they're not, there can be various problems in an aquarium, like diseases, ick, fin rot, and stuff like that. But if you follow the steps right, if you're patient, and if you do your research, that you shouldn't be really encountering those problems. Okay, how to maintain your aquarium. Let's say you've had this aquarium for about 3 weeks now. The fish are happy. You're feeding them happily. What should you do to clean up? First, if you have plants, you would like to check on them, trim them if they're very big. Very big. Again, mine is not a good example because of the big honking mass of water wisteria at the back. So trim your plants, because the things underneath it kind of need the light and stuff like that. Next is your filter. Your filter by this time will be very gunky and scummy. So what you should do is shut off your filter. Gravel vacuum is this big hose contraptions that you can buy at the pet store. So gravel vacuum your gravel, and this also takes out some of the water for your water exchanges. After you put that water into a pail or a bucket, grab your filter media and give it a little bit of a squeeze aquarium water that you're planning to discard. Just because you're not really trying to clean it 100%, you're just trying to get rid of the detritus that builds up, like the excess fish poop or the dead plant matter that builds up in your filter. You're not trying to kill the denitrifying bacteria, because that would be bad, because that would see you cycling your aquarium again, and you don't want that. And now you're ready to put the water back in. So you roughly want to put the same amount of water in as you took out. Like I said earlier, about 25% every 2 weeks is a good measure. Before you add the water into your tank though, make sure to use your water conditioner to get rid of the chlorines and chloramines as before. So add the recommended dose and give it a little swish around, and then add it to your tank. And that's basically it. That's basically fish keeping in general. I hope you learned something from what I did, and I'm pretty sure this video is quite long already. This is just me like rambling stuff from what I learned over 6 years. And I hope this is very helpful for every one of you, and I genuinely do hope that you pick up this hobby. Again, thanks for tuning in, and have a wonderful day.